The 1980s. A decade of neon lights, synthwave beats, and some of the boldest, darkest science fiction ever put to screen. But what if I told you some of those films were considered too dangerous to exist? Governments banned them, studios buried them, audiences whispered about them like forbidden secrets. These weren't just movies. They were cinematic time bombs designed to explode social norms and leave censors scrambling. And today, we're digging up 13 banned sci-fi and sci-fi adjacent movies from the 80s that terrified politicians, shocked censors, and still echo in our culture today. Buckle up, because some of these films didn't just entertain. They predicted the future we're living in now. Number 1. Escape from New York, 1981. We kick things off with John Carpenter's dystopian action thriller, Escape from New York. Carpenter imagined America's greatest city, Manhattan, as a maximum security prison, and governments around the world panicked. Kurt Russell, in his iconic role as Snake Plissken, plays a war veteran turned criminal, forced to rescue the president from this anarchic wasteland. What made this film so dangerous wasn't just its spectacular violence, but its audacious portrayal of American society as fundamentally broken and beyond redemption. With a modest $6 million budget, Carpenter used abandoned buildings and practical effects to create a terrifyingly real post-apocalyptic New York, a vision of urban decay that felt chillingly plausible. Critics praised Carpenter's direction and Russell's anti-hero performance, but government officials were horrified. The movie was outright banned in several Eastern Bloc countries, where authorities feared its images of urban collapse might inspire revolution against communist governments. Ironically, it was also condemned in some Western countries for its negative portrayal of American institutions and its cynical depiction of the U.S. government willing to sacrifice citizens for political expediency. Carpenter's vision of 1997 Manhattan as a bombed-out prison colony seemed impossible in 1981, but its themes of institutional failure and urban decay proved prophetic. Despite censorship attempts, the box office was strong at $25.2 million domestic, proving audiences were hungry for anti-establishment entertainment. Modern viewers recognize Escape from New York as a prescient warning about authoritarian overreach and social collapse. But its initial release faced constant political pressure. Number 2. The Thing from 1982. Next up, another John Carpenter masterpiece, The Thing, a shape-shifting horror film that faced bans and heavy censorship. This time, it was less about political statements and more about pure, visceral terror and a bleak, nihilistic worldview. Kurt Russell leads an ensemble cast of Antarctic researchers who discover an alien parasite that can perfectly imitate any living creature, creating paranoia so intense that the men turn against each other with devastating results. What made this film controversial wasn't just Rob Bottin's groundbreaking practical effects, which remain some of the most disturbing ever filmed, but Carpenter's chilling suggestion that isolation and fear can transform ordinary people into savage animals. The film's $15 million budget allowed for creature effects that pushed the boundaries of what audiences could stomach, with scenes of bodily transformation so graphic that theater owners received complaint calls during every screening. Critics were initially divided. Some praised its technical achievements, while others condemned its relentless bleakness and graphic violence. The film was banned outright in several countries, including parts of Germany, where authorities considered its paranoia themes too similar to Cold War anxieties about communist infiltration. British censors heavily cut its most graphic sequences. The film's most controversial element was its ending, which suggests evil has triumphed and humanity's fate remains uncertain, a conclusion so disturbing that Universal considered reshooting it.
Box office was disappointing at $19.6 million domestic, partly because audiences in 1982 preferred the optimism of E.T. over Carpenter's cosmic pessimism. Yet its reputation grew significantly over the decades. Modern audiences now appreciate how The Thing's themes of paranoia and social breakdown anticipated everything from AIDS hysteria to social media conspiracy theories, solidifying its place as one of the greatest horror films ever made. Number 3. Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. From the icy wastes to a blissed portrayal of environmental collapse leading to total social breakdown, the film's $4 million budget achieved epic scope through creative...
Number 4. Scanners, 1981. Next on our list is David Cronenberg's telepathic thriller Scanners, a film banned in several countries for its graphic, head-exploding violence and disturbing exploration of government mind control experiments. Michael Ironside and Stephen Lack star as psychics whose mental powers can literally make people's skulls burst in fountains of blood and brain matter. What made this film controversial wasn't just its spectacular gore effects, but its paranoid vision of secret government programs creating superhuman weapons through illegal medical experimentation. The film's $4.1 million budget achieved shocking practical effects through innovative techniques that made audiences genuinely believe they were watching real violence rather than movie magic. Critics praised Cronenberg's direction and the film's exploration of corporate conspiracy themes, but censors were horrified by its graphic depictions of psychic violence and medical torture. The film was banned outright in several European countries, where authorities considered its opening head explosion scene too realistic and potentially traumatic for viewers. British censors cut significant portions of the film's violence, including close-ups of exploding heads and scenes of surgical experimentation. German authorities refused to release the film theatrically due to concerns about its depiction of medical experimentation, which resonated uncomfortably with Nazi-era history. Its most controversial element was its suggestion that governments routinely conduct illegal experiments on citizens, using them as test subjects for weapons development. Cronenberg's exploration of corporate control over human evolution struck many viewers as uncomfortably plausible, especially during a decade of increasing pharmaceutical industry influence. Box office was modest at $14.2 million worldwide, but the film gained a massive cult following through home video and cable television broadcasts. Its influence on body horror cinema is immeasurable, inspiring countless imitators. Modern audiences recognize Scanners as a prescient warning about biotechnology and corporate power, but its initial release faced constant pressure from censors who found its violence too realistic and its political implications too dangerous. Number 5. Strange Days, 1995, 80s production. While technically released in 1995, Kathryn Bigelow's cyberpunk thriller Strange Days was conceived and partially developed in the late 80s, earning its place on this list as a virtual reality nightmare so disturbing that several countries refused to screen it. Ralph Fiennes plays a black market dealer in illegal brain recordings that allow users to experience other people's memories and sensations, including rape and murder, from both victim and perpetrator perspectives. What made this film explosive wasn't just its graphic violence and sexual content, but its unflinching examination of racial violence and police brutality, which proved too inflammatory for many audiences. The film's $42 million budget created cutting-edge virtual reality sequences that blurred the line between experience and reality, forcing viewers to confront their own voyeuristic desires. Critics were divided. Some praised its technical innovation and social commentary, while others condemned it as exploitative and unnecessarily violent. The film was banned in several countries due to its graphic rape sequences and its controversial climax involving the videotaped murder of a black activist by white police officers. British censors demanded significant cuts to the film's sexual violence, while German authorities refused to certify it for theatrical release without major editing. Australian censors banned the film entirely, considering its combination of sexual violence and racial themes too inflammatory for public viewing. Its most controversial element was its suggestion that virtual reality technology would inevitably be used for exploitation and abuse rather than entertainment or education.
Bigelow's direction forces audiences to question their own complicity in violence by making them experience crimes from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Box office was disastrous at $8.9 million domestic, partly because distributors struggled to market such controversial content. The film's exploration of technology-mediated violence and racial injustice proved remarkably prescient, anticipating everything from smartphone videos of police brutality to virtual reality addiction. Modern viewers recognize Strange Days as a visionary work that anticipated the dark side of digital culture, but its theatrical release was severely limited by censorship and industry self-censorship.
Number 8. Videodrome, 1983. David Cronenberg delivers another body horror classic with Videodrome, a media satire about a television's extensive cuts to its graphic body horror and sexual violence. James Woods stars as a sleazy TV executive who becomes obsessed with a broadcast signal showing real torture and murder, only to discover that watching the program literally transforms his body into a grotesque organic video player. What makes this film genuinely dangerous isn't just its spectacular practical effects, but its prescient warnings about media addiction and technology's power to rewire human consciousness in fundamentally disturbing ways. The film's $5.9 million budget allowed for groundbreaking makeup effects by Rick Baker that created some of cinema's most disturbing imagery, including a man's torso developing a vaginal opening that can receive videotapes. Critics were divided, but censors universally found its content too disturbing for public consumption. The film was banned entirely in several countries, including parts of Australia, where authorities considered its combination of sexual violence and body horror too extreme for any rating category. British censors demanded significant cuts to its most graphic sequences, removing close-ups of bodily transformation and scenes linking sexual arousal with violence and technology. German authorities initially refused to release the film theatrically, considering its exploration of media-induced psychosis too dangerous during a period of concern about television's social influence. Its most controversial element was its suggestion that consuming violent media literally transforms viewers into violent sociopaths, making censors afraid that the film itself might prove its own thesis. Cronenberg's direction creates a hallucinatory experience that blurs the line between reality and media-induced fantasy, forcing audiences to question their own relationship with violent entertainment. Box office was disastrous at $2.1 million domestic, partly because Universal Pictures struggled to market such controversial content. The film's exploration of media addiction and technological body horror proved remarkably prescient, anticipating everything from internet addiction to virtual reality's psychological effects. Number 9. A Clockwork Orange, 1971, 80s Revival. While Stanley Kubrick's dystopian masterpiece, A Clockwork Orange, was made in 1971, it gained its most controversial reputation during 80s revival screenings. It was during this decade that the director himself banned it from British theaters after receiving death threats. Malcolm McDowell stars as Alex Delarge, a charismatic sociopath who leads a gang committing ultra-violent crimes before being subjected to experimental psychological conditioning. What makes this film eternally controversial isn't just its graphic depictions of rape and violence, but its complex moral questions about free will, punishment, and society's right to control individual behavior through technological means. The film's innovative cinematography and Beethoven-heavy soundtrack create a disturbing beauty that makes violence aesthetically appealing, forcing audiences to confront their own capacity for enjoying brutality. Critics recognized the film's brilliance immediately, but public reaction was explosive. The film was banned in multiple countries throughout the 1980s, with authorities citing concerns about copycat violence and its potential influence on youth culture. After several highly publicized crimes were linked to the film, Kubrick himself requested that Warner Bros. Remove it from British distribution, creating a ban that lasted until after his death in 1999. The film was also banned or heavily censored in South Africa, Singapore, Malaysia, Spain, Brazil, and parts of Canada, each citing different moral or political objections. Its most controversial element was its suggestion that consuming violent media literally transforms viewers into violent sociopaths, making censors afraid that the film itself might prove its own thesis.
Cronenberg's direction creates a hallucinatory experience that blurs the line between reality and media-induced fantasy, forcing audiences to question their own relationship with violent entertainment. Box office was disastrous at $2.1 million domestic, partly because Universal Pictures struggled to market such controversial content. The film's exploration of media addiction and technological body horror proved remarkably prescient, anticipating everything from internet addiction to virtual reality psychological.
Number 10. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam's dystopian bureaucratic nightmare, Brazil, was so politically inflammatory that Universal Pictures tried to bury it completely, leading to one of Hollywood's most famous battles between director and studio over creative control. Jonathan Pryce stars as a low-level government clerk in a totalitarian future where administrative incompetence leads to terrorism, torture, and the complete breakdown of human dignity in the name of efficiency and security. What makes this film the most dangerous sci-fi movie of the decade isn't its visual spectacle, but its devastating satire of government bureaucracy and corporate power that studio executives found too politically threatening for mainstream release. The film's $15 million budget created a fully realized dystopian world that feels both fantastical and uncomfortably familiar, illustrating how ordinary bureaucrats become complicit in systematic oppression and state-sponsored violence. Critics universally praised Gilliam's direction and the film's technical achievements, but Universal executives were horrified by its political implications and tried to re-edit it into a more commercially acceptable love story. Gilliam fought a public battle with the studio for over a year, eventually forcing them to release his director's cut after critics voted it the best film of 1985 based on bootleg screenings. The film was banned or heavily censored in multiple countries, where authorities recognized its pointed criticism of authoritarian government and corporate control over individual freedom. Several Eastern Bloc countries refused its distribution, while some Western nations demanded cuts to scenes depicting government torture and bureaucratic incompetence. Its most controversial element was its suggestion that modern democratic governments are only superficially different from totalitarian regimes, using bureaucracy and technological surveillance to control citizens just as effectively as overt oppression. Gilliam's vision of a world where paperwork becomes more important than human life struck many viewers as uncomfortably plausible. Box office was limited at $9.9 million domestic, partly because Universal's half-hearted promotion reflected their discomfort with the film's political message. Number 11. Necromantik, 1987. Now we delve into the deeper, darker corners of 80s controversial cinema with a film that pushed boundaries to their absolute breaking point. Jörg Buttgereit's Necromantik. This German underground film is less a sci-fi piece and more a visceral, transgressive horror movie, but its extreme themes led to widespread bans and cemented its notorious reputation in the decade of excess. The plot follows a street cleaner who brings home a corpse from his job for himself and his girlfriend to enjoy, descending into an utterly depraved and nihilistic exploration of necrophilia and extreme gore. Why was it banned? Because it depicted explicit necrophilia, graphic mutilation, and offered absolutely no moral redemption or traditional narrative. It was designed to shock and disgust, and it succeeded spectacularly. Germany banned it almost immediately, confiscating prints and making its distribution a criminal offense. Other countries followed suit, with its content deemed beyond any rating system or public tolerance. It wasn't just controversial, it was considered an assault on public decency. Necromantik exists outside the mainstream, a true cinematic provocation that tested how far horror could go before society says stop. It became a symbol of extreme underground cinema and the intense censorship battles that raged in the late 80s. While not a typical sci-fi film, its experimental nature and a fascination with the grotesque push against the boundaries of reality, much like body horror, making it sci-fi adjacent in its disturbing exploration of human or inhuman limits. Modern audiences still find it incredibly difficult to watch, proving its power to disturb has not diminished. Number 12. The Deer Hunter, controversial cut in the 80s. Our penultimate entry is a slightly different case, Michael Cimino's powerful war drama The Deer Hunter.
While primarily released in 1978, its rescreenings and widespread availability on video in the 80s saw it face renewed bans and heavy censorship, particularly for certain controversial scenes. This film, depicting the lives of 3 American steelworkers serving in the Vietnam War, is a brutal examination of trauma, friendship, and the psychological scars of conflict. Why was it banned in the 80s, especially in certain regions? Its most infamous scenes involve Russian roulette, depicted with harrowing intensity and a relentless focus on the character's desperation. These scenes were accused of historical falsification and extreme gratuitous violence, particularly by Soviet critics who condemned its portrayal of Vietnamese soldiers. Governments in parts of Asia and Europe sensitive to political narratives surrounding the Vietnam War or Cold War tensions found its content problematic. Authorities feared it would stir anti-Vietnam or anti-Russian sentiment, given the ongoing geopolitical climate of the decade. The visceral nature of the violence and the moral ambiguity of its characters also contributed to its troubled reception. Critics recognized its profound artistic merit, earning it 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. However, its unflinching look at the horrors of war and its psychological impact meant that it was consistently challenged by censors. Even today, those Russian roulette scenes remain a focal point of discussion and controversy, with debates continuing over their historical accuracy versus their dramatic impact. The Deer Hunter's 80s censorship history reminds us that even critically acclaimed films can become targets when their content touches on raw nerves of national identity, war, and political sensitivity. It stands as a testament to the power of cinema to provoke deep, uncomfortable reflection even decades after its initial release.
Number 13, Zombie Flesheaters, 1979/80s. Finally, at number 13, we have a film that became a symbol of the video nasty era in the UK and faced bans worldwide. Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesheaters, known internationally as Zombie 2. Though released in 1979, its widespread distribution on home video in the early 80s ignited a moral panic and led to its classification as one of the most censored and banned films of the decade. This Italian zombie horror film acts as an unofficial sequel to George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead and is infamous for its relentless, graphic gore. The plot involves a doctor's daughter and a journalist investigating a mysterious zombie outbreak on a remote Caribbean island. But the plot is secondary to Fulci's mastery of stomach-churning special effects. Why was it banned in multiple countries? It was primarily for its explicit and prolonged scenes of extreme violence and gore, including an iconic sequence of an eyeball being slowly impaled by a wooden splinter and numerous instances of flesh ripping and dismemberment. In the UK, it was famously prosecuted as a video nasty under obscenity laws, leading to its outright ban and the destruction of video copies. Similar bans or heavy censorship were enforced across Europe and other parts of the world. Authorities argued that such depictions were purely exploitative, morally corrupting, and posed a threat to public decency, particularly for younger viewers who could easily access it on VHS. The film became a battleground in the censorship wars of the 80s, with civil liberties advocates arguing against the moral panic, while conservative groups demanded tighter controls. Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, Zombie Flesheaters garnered a massive cult following. It was too fake to be real, yet too real in its depictions to be ignored by censors. Modern horror fans often celebrate Fulci's audacious vision and groundbreaking practical effects, recognizing its significant impact on the zombie subgenre. But its history stands as a stark reminder of the intense scrutiny and outright bans that films with challenging graphic content faced in the 1980s. Okay, so there you have it. 13 sci-fi and sci-fi adjacent masterpieces that governments and studios tried to erase because they dared to imagine futures, or present realities, too uncomfortable to face. From Carpenter's anti-capitalist Aliens to Cronenberg's media-addicted Mutations, from Gilliam's bureaucratic nightmares to Fulci's shocking gore, these films didn't just entertain. They predicted the dystopian realities, the social anxieties, and the moral dilemmas we're living through today.
Whether it was Brazil's chilling depiction of government oversight, Videodrome's warnings about technology addiction, or even the visceral shock of Necromantik and zombie Flesheaters, these movies saw our current problems coming decades before anyone else. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these banned sci-fi films shocked you the most? Did we miss any other 80s films that deserve to be suppressed by nervous censors, or perhaps celebrated for their audacity? And here's the question that'll start an interstellar war in the comments. Were authorities right to ban these films to protect society? Or do visionary artists have a responsibility to show us uncomfortable truths about our future, even when those truths are too disturbing for mass consumption? Drop your controversial takes below, because the best science fiction has always been about holding up a mirror to humanity's worst instincts, fears, and sometimes its most prescient warnings.